I want to welcome now Natalia Fedorova, who's an artist, curator, researcher, and educator in the field of contemporary art and literature. She works around notion centered around mediation between human, language, technology, and ecosystems. Natalia's latest work and art pieces can be classified as interspecies communicators. To be the wind for the trees translates the physiological process of trees into poetic lines. To be is a semiotic simulator that allows us to create a basis for a common human and be unveiled. So currently Natalia is a guest researcher at the Laboratory for Research and Study for Contemporary Approaches to Philosophy at the Paris 8 University, and that's supported by the POSE program, this really important program that allows scholars going through drastic and critical problems to get away from their home countries in order to find a safer place to work. And she's teaching technology, art, and experimental writing at Simon Lee Beyond Borders. And we also have the immense luck of having Natalia here in Arles as a resident, like an extended residency, which has lasted for now almost a year, right? If I'm right, at least those conversations have been for this duration. And so really, I'm really thrilled, as we were saying, to be able to bring this sort of energy where the knowledge production doesn't only come from that side of the stage, but is also going to come from the audience that is going to be participating and is going to leave this sort of, visitor state of mind. It's wonderful to think of this back and forth in terms of knowledge and content creation. And so, Natalia, again, I do thank you for your friendship and accepting to conduct this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for the introduction, and I'm really happy to see all of you in such an early hour in such a beautiful weather here to learn about generative poetry and to try and compose our own text, our own poetic lines with the trees. So as the title states, today I'm going to talk to you about wind, trees, and poems. And I would like to be introducing those through the prism of generative poetry. A generative poem is a machine that produces words. It's an algorithm that produces words. And if you have never seen a generative poem, here is at the background, there is an example of Tom Corby poem, which is called Cyclone. And you can see the shape of the cyclone. That's the shape of the atmospheric front. And in the shape of the atmospheric front, you can see words. And these words are internet debates of extremist religious organizations and extremist politics. And those little pieces of those debates are formed shaped in the form of the weather fronts, and they move. And you can see some kind of an analog between something that happens in the nature and something that happens in the social environment. So I'm going to be talking about generative poetry, and that would include generative art. That has to do with ecology. And that also has to do with nature, and that has to do with analyzing and translating the data that is connected with natural phenomena. And you can see there's not too much data in this little concrete poem by Eugen Gamringer, that was created back in the 50s, but there is a lot of wind in it. You see a constellation, and you can imagine how wind passes through the spaces between the letters. So there is wind. The other work that I imagined would give us the context of generative art is the work of Lawrence Mall stuff, which is called NEMA Observatorium. And the experience that you are getting in it is an experience of someone being in the eye of the storm. So being in the eye of the storm is quite a calm place, right? There is a storm around you, and you are in the place of safety. This is done with the help of little PVC particles that produce a lot of noise, that circle around you, but you are sitting in the center observing this spectacle of nature. And I'll give one more example of the work of J.R. Carpenter, which is called The Picture of the Wind. This work connects this work was inspired by the floods in England, in southwest England, in 2014. I don't know if any one of you has experienced those, but there was immense destruction, and the poem uses the wind forecasts to generate the words in blue real time. And something that you see in the squares is a lyric poetic diary. The background is a map of the coastline. So these are examples of generative art and generative poetry that are working with natural phenomenon. And if we think of the principles that are used to do so, we can say that despite the plethora of technology that is available to us, in most of the cases, this would be visual, or visual as in the work of J.R. Carpenter, right, or physical as in the work of Lawrence Malstaff, imitation of properties of a natural phenomenon. And these properties can also be hacked, as we will see in the work of Agnes Brandes' 3ID. And that can also be, for example, I'll show this one. This can also be a translation of data, and this is something that we are going to be doing today, the translation of the 12 parameters of the tree into the poetic lines. And I'll just show you one example of work which is concerned with the machine vision. So it uses drones to create those visuals. And what drones are looking for, what drones are seeing, is the percentage of shore and water, right? When you are at the coastline, it's very hard to understand where is the shore and where does the sea start, or where does the ocean start. So this line that you see now is an analysis of a machine vision, and the poems are generated to give the comment on the existence of the Anthropocene, on the influence of the Anthropocene on the coastline. And I'll skip to the other points. We can also think of environmental art in the context of Internet of Things, and to be more precise, Internet of animals, Internet of plants. We can go a little bit further with that. What do I mean when I say Internet of Things, or Internet of plants, or Internet of animals? I mean that we look at the natural phenomenon that are equipped with a sensor. So we put a sensor on the natural phenomenon, and that helps these agents to present the world from their point of view. So we suddenly have a lot of information about how birds move, for instance, or how yesterday we were obsessing about the data that we got on the trees here, and we found out that the temperature of the soil, the temperature of the trunk, and the temperature outside, they differ a lot. So outside it was 16 degrees, I think even 13 degrees, so the soil was 17 and the tree trunk was 16. So the tree trunk is a little bit colder than the soil. Did you know? I didn't. So with the help of the Internet of Trees, Internet of Trees, Internet of Animals, Internet of Things, we're able to learn new approaches, but we are also going to be able to think of some different aesthetics, think of some different aesthetic forms. So I'll just briefly show what we are going to be doing today. So we are going to be creating, you are going to be creating the Garden of Poems. So we are going to be working with these trees. There's 3 holly oak, then maple of Montpellier, and the Baltic pine. And I think that this workshop is especially relevant, is especially timely, for the reason that Parc d'Atelier is kind of a natural machine. It is an artificially created model of 3 microclimates of Bouches du Rhône, Camargue, Alpilles, and Crau. So I tried to use the trees from all of those settings, hence the 3 trees. So we're going to be using these parameters. So we will work with air temperature, air humidity, soil temperature, soil humidity, angle of the tree, ambient light, UV light, spectrometer, sublow, atmospheric pressure, and we are going to count dust particles in pieces. So you'll know exactly the number of pieces of the dust particles at a certain time. So this is going to look like this. I hope it will open. Okay. It's that. And your poems will appear here at this part. Okay, so before we do this, I would also like to probably formulate that the approach here, the approach that I'm taking, you have seen that it's not quite a thematic approach. This is not exactly the call for action. So with these generative poems, we are not exactly saying what to do or what not to do. But rather, the approach is a little bit more formal, and the theme that I want us to explore today is what is that computation, the sensors, the Internet of Trees, can contribute to generative art and poetry in terms of new visions, new perceptions, and new aesthetics. And certainly, what is it that you personally can learn and experience with the help of sensors? How can those help you extend your perception of the world? Okay, so as I promised, I'm going to be giving a little bit of context of the generative poetry. So I don't know if you thought of it, but we could probably, if we wanted to be not terribly precise and maybe a little bit imaginative, we could say that generative poetry starts from as early as 13th century, and these construction, that one, the circular one, that's from Ars Magna by Raymond Lull, which was with theological some theological ideas that were put on the squares, circles, and triangles, and that were manipulated, and the machine was able to say whether the statement is true or false. So it's, as you can imagine, I didn't see this machine. I read the descriptions, but we can trace the idea of artificial intelligence and connect the idea of artificial intelligence with the production of language, with processing of language, and place it as early and trace it as early as 13th century. But if we wanted to be more precise, certainly the first work of electronic literature, and when we talk about generative poetry, we can put it in the context of electronic literature, meaning literature produced with the computer, with computation. Even though the computer at 1953 looked a little bit different, you see at the right, at the left, the printer which served as a screen, and there is an, so this is the generator of love letters that was produced by Christopher Strachey. That was produced on Manchester Mark, the machine that Turing was working on. And he made several, Christopher Strachey made several programs. One was playing chess, one was playing draughts. The other one was singing a song, and the third one was writing love poems. And I like to think that one of the first texts that were produced by the computer are actually love poems. But this is the emulator of the poems done by Nick Monfort. It's actually a very fair emulator based on the documentation and research. So you can, if you look at this text, and I'll probably excuse myself and read a little bit of it. Jewel duck, my little fervor pants for you tender yearning. You are my adorable lust, my passionate fellow feeling. And I'll stop here. So let me maybe show you just a little bit of how this works, because this is what we will be doing today. So you see that it has adjectives, right? Adorable, affectionate, curious, darling. Then nouns, so it uses adjective and noun. Then adverbs and verbs, and puts them in quite a formulaic construction. So what can we collect, what we can experience from these texts? We can experience irony. We can experience something which absurd poetry gives us as an experience, which is fun. You can be entertained by that. But there is also a little critical statement, there is a little critical question about how actually formulaic is our love communication and how formulaic is our communication in general. So are maybe we more of this computers, maybe not. So that was the historical context, and maybe I'll show you one more work. So that was 1950s before the computer, and I'll show you something, the documentation. I hope it's not gonna pop, the advertisement is not gonna pop. Probably it will. I don't know, what will I do? No. So this was created with the first personal computer by B.P. Nicol in Canada in 1984, as you can see. And this steps follows the footstep of the concrete poetry, but animates it. So it uses the screen as a space in which words are little building blocks. So you can see that the waves are moving around the rock. Also an imitation, right, as we were saying before. Maybe I'll stop it here. You should also imagine that it was all created on a screen of that size. So maybe on the big screen it looks more minimalist than it was for the creator of the work. And maybe I'll show this. which is a literary clock, and this is indeed an amazing work. Oh. Finally, it happened. I knew that it's gonna happen. Up, voila. So that's probably one of the most unusual hypertexts that I've ever seen. So this work types time. So in the center, you see the time. The letters in bold are numbers. So E and N would give the hour and minute, and you see that the lower lines give the seconds, so the seconds change. And once you click, you see, once you click on the word, once you click, the poem changes. There are 4 pages of a poem, and it has 365 words as the days of the year. So it's kind of a time machine that was created by John Kiley. I think it's probably one of the most unusual and elaborate text generators, created, as you can see, back in 1995. Okay, I'll have to finish with the historical context. And I will move I'll just mention briefly some generative principles. So we've been looking at data as something that we can use to change the words. So the data changes, the words change. But we can also use, for instance, E. coli bacteria as the mutations of E. coli bacteria to generate a new text. So this is the line from the book of Genesis: let man have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So what Eduardo Katz does, he translates this into Morse code, and then from Morse code to the DNA code, and literally puts it into E. coli bacteria. E. coli bacteria is something that you can find in the sands of Mars. So it's something that you cannot kill. So if you wanted to code your library somewhere for forever, you'd probably put it on E. coli bacteria, and hence the entrance to E. coli bacteria of the early biological art. Bacteria is here in the Petri dish that you see in this round thing in the middle of the image, and so the project was put on the web because in 1990s web is the most exciting thing. So the visitors of the website were asked the question whether they agree or disagree to this statement. And if they agree, the light switches on and it causes the mutation of bacteria. And here, let AAN have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air, and etc. So this is the response of the E. coli bacteria. And maybe I'll show you one more, which is also, I find it one of the most unusual works of generative poetry. This is Ruth Schnell. And literally when you enter the exhibition space, you just see this blocks of wood or plastic with one LED stripe on it, just one vertical stripe. So blocks and vertical stripes and nothing else. And I mean, fair example of minimalist art. You come to a gallery, just see stripes of LED art. Would be enough for some people. But actually, you turn your head like this, and because your eyes process information slightly slower, you have an after image. For example, if you look at the light and you close your eyes, you will have the after image of the source of light. So what we see when we turn our head are the words that are connected with the theme of the embodiment, like little poems about embodiment, that are actually printed on the apples of, not printed, but imprinted on the apples of our eyes. So here, the movement of your head, the fact, the way we process images, this is what becomes a generative principle. Okay, and I'll show you a little bit of contemporary work. I didn't, maybe I'll show this. So we will be working not exactly with, we will have minimalist means, but we will have relatively big data. So the sensors change every minute. The information on the sensors changes every minute. So I'll just show the example of very big data poetry. And so this is David Javi Johnston, and that's something that was done in 2019. So during the year 2019, he was generating poems constantly and was able to print 12 books. So he was formulating that the work of working with the work of creating the poems with AI is the work of chiseling. So there are lots of words and you chisel your poem from this. And he was saying that it's a very unusual experience when you look at these poems. They are supposed to be either science or divinations or some prophecies or maybe some kind of hints. So you write something, but you don't quite understand what you're writing, but maybe it's speaking to you. Though I liked the imagery of chiseling from the big data. But there can be much more minimal generations. For example, this work, which is created with 256 signs of code, so it's just one line of code. And see, it's a mini novel. It's a mini story, which is called The Consequence. And there is something happening and it has consequences, a beginning, and so a name, and so a fact, and so a case, and so a book door, and so a head. Well, there is some line of events happening here. There are works that engage with even less, but even smaller changes. So if you look smaller changes in one letter are used to connect one generation to the other. So this is the work Subliteral Narrative by Joanna Howard and John Cayley, also from 2019. If you look at the right example, one seated in her novel, and the next generation would be one coded in his hovel. So what is changed is in every word, one letter is changed. So that changing of one letter can also be mechanics based on which you create the next generations. I'll show you something which is more scaled. So for instance, this is Janine Naji's river, and this is the main river of Dublin, so it's just a map of Dublin. In most of the cases, the poems that use big volumes of text, they usually take the corpuses of texts of important literary authors. So this one is certainly the work of James Joyce. And for instance, for some reason I'll try to open this website, but I'm not sure if it will open because the security doesn't want it to open, so you'll have to open it at home. This is, so it's usually when we analyze the data, so we usually quote a corpus of a significant writer, or we use a diary format. So this work is a diary of the grandfather of the author, of Maria Mencia, and this is a diary of Spanish anti-Frankist rebellion who was taken on a ship which was called Winnipeg by Neruda to Chile. And this is an experience of exile. The person is lost, he's on a ship, he's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, he doesn't understand where he's going and what's awaiting, what's ahead for him. So the text also has the maps, and you can point at a space on the map, and you will see this floating, lost, some kind of vertigo text that reflects on the experience of this person on the ship. And maybe I'll just show you this, which is supposed to be something familiar. This is a meditative poem, which is called Dial, and it is created in the shape of something that we recognize and probably dwell in. This can be called our second nature, our natural digital environment. So this is a messenger, kind of something that is supposed to remind you of the messenger. And what it tries to replicate is this logic of endless chatting. And you have times here, and they are supposed to change the time, but the change of the time is a little bit vague because you forget about time when you are chatting. If you look at how it's made, you will see that there are positive things, exhausted, negative abstracts, drained, and if you look how it's structured, so if the left side says positive things, the response is positive things, and the weather symbol. So it's kind of the mirrored character of the conversation in the chat that you are experiencing in this poetry generator. And you see that if we talk about the aesthetic properties of the poetry generators, we can use the words meditative, we can think of the word ambient, we can probably say that they are absurd, we can probably say that they're inquisitive, they are asking about language, inquiring about the language, questioning the language. So this is what we are going to be doing today. We are going to be using the sensors, but we are also going to be seeing if we can use the language, if we can inquire the language, if we can tweak a language a little bit in order to have new cognitive experience, in order to have more, in order to have new, the experience of the other Umwelt, the experience of other being, the experience of the tree. And I'll probably finish with with the book that is coming out in computer-generated text, 1953-2023, the Anthology of Generated Text. This is going to be a big anthology. just to show you that the generative text can exist outside of the screen, exist in the world of the printed literature, and to stress the fact that the generated text is certainly not limited to the ChatGPT, though many works here are created with a ChatGPT, but starts much earlier and can use big data and complex principles and be some kind of out-of-the-box thing, but also can be a very small DIY machine made up of 256 signs of code. Okay, so I think at this point we will, am I doing on time? Yeah. We are going to skip to our workshop part. And I'm going to, how are you? You're probably a little bit not under the weather, but maybe under my talking about the weather. Can we so let me ask you a question. We are going to be writing for 5 minutes, something. Would you rather stay here or would you rather go to a nice, beautifully lit space for the workshop? What do we do? Do we stay or do we go? Darkness. Martin. Okay, shall we? Yeah? Okay, let's go. Thank you.